Summon the Spectre.
What's good, y'all? Welcome to episode 32 of the SpectreVerse Podcast. I'm your host, JariSpectre, aka the Spectre, Jaden Mercer, inside of the pro wrestling ring, and I want to thank each and every single one of you for joining me on this Tuesday, wherever you may be watching or listening from. We have quite a bit to talk about on today's episode in regards to AEW going into All In this Sunday. We also are going to discuss what happened on Raw and Smackdown. But before we jump into any of that, we're going to start today's episode with easily the biggest news story coming out of this past week, and that is Ilja Dragunov. He is no longer with the WWE. I know for the longest time, myself and many others included kept asking, where is Ilja Dragunov on TV? Why aren't they using him? Is it a visa issue? Is it not enough time to get him on television? If so, why not? All of those questions were answered this past week, and that is Ilja Dragunov's contract officially expired, and he did not renew with the WWE. There's many different scenarios that a lot of people can look at this as. First one is Ilja Dragunov, at least to WWE's eye, he wasn't a numbers mover. He was very good in the ring, and he was good as far as his presentation and his execution. However, he wasn't a numbers mover. That's their side of the story, which in a sense is true. But there's a huge caveat when it comes to that, and we're going to talk about that here in a second. On the other hand, you got people like me, people that know ball, that watch this shit religiously, and we look at it as one of your top professional wrestlers on the planet that you have signed under contract, and you can't find anything for that man to do creatively. One of the best in-ring performers and one of the most realistic and genuine performers inside of that ring. He loves to professionally wrestle, and he's very good at it too. He is a guy, as soon as he steps in those ropes, people are like, oh shit, it's about to go down. And you're telling me you, WWE creative, have nothing for him? You can't write captivating television for that man? It's a shame. It truly is a shame. It's a shame that we were not able to get a proper Ilja Dragunov versus Gunther match on television in a marquee scenario. It's a shame what they did with Ilja Dragunov and how they barely gave him any sort of TV time outside of his little reign as the United States champion while continuing the open challenge gimmick. It's a shame that that's all they saw him as. Now, what does this mean for Ilja Dragunov? It means that he does not have a non-compete clause. He can go anywhere at this point and he can perform. I will not be surprised in the slightest to see that man this Sunday at AEW All In. I would not be shocked whatsoever. And honestly, I feel like that's where he's going to end up at. He is going to be a member of the AEW roster, and we, as fans of professional wrestling, are going to get stellar matches, which is going to be right up that man's alley. The only big concern now is, will he be treated properly over there? And the answer, I think, it's sad, but it's true. The answer is going to be no. At least not as of now. He is going to be stuck in the mid-card limbo of doing pretty much nothing. And the only reason I say that is because, let's look at the AEW roster as a whole, it is star-studded from the top all the way to the bottom. There's a lot of really, really good workers in AEW as where we stand right now. The only problem is there is not enough people and fans that gravitate to those types of pro wrestlers. And the people that do gravitate to those type of pro wrestlers, it's not enough to build them up to get them to the main event scene and to be in that consistent conversation. I look at guys like Jay White, who I feel has been done absolutely dirty over in AEW. But the fact of the matter is, the Ilja Dragunov situation leaving WWE, do I blame the man whatsoever? No. He has every right to not re-sign with WWE. And granted, I feel like it was more of a, both people knew their limitations and neither of them were willing to fight for it. So they just mutually parted ways. They shook each other's hands and said, hey, no beef whatsoever. That's what happened. It just sucks how WWE is so neglectant to let top tier talent walk like that because they're not moving numbers. The only reason you're seeing it as they're not moving numbers is because you're not writing good television to get fans to invest into said wrestler. I mean, we can talk, it's not just about Ilja Dragunov at this point. This is about the whole mid-card division as a whole. And anybody that is not in that main event scene right now. Look at guys like Trick Williams. He was pushing numbers because he organically got over due to having a great theme song and a catchy whoop that trick. And all of that helped booster him up in the scene, right? Obviously, we're going to exclude the CM Punks, the Kevin Owens, the Sami Zayns, the Cody Rhodes, the Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins. We're going to exclude all those guys out of the picture. There's still a lot of talent on both Raw and SmackDown. Looking at guys like Carmelo Hayes, looking at guys like Johnny Gargano, looking at people like Damian Priest, who I will say, for a guy his age, because let's not get it twisted, he is up there in age. He is still one hell of a professional wrestler who has been doing absolutely nothing ever since he left Judgment Day. Which is also sad. Which now points the blame right back at WWE Creative. These guys, these talented wrestlers, are either going to smarten up or they're not going to be moving numbers due to your lack of creativity, and they're going to walk. And they're going to go elsewhere. And they're going to be better off for it. Same with Ilja. Ilja is going to be absolutely fine. He will not be neglected. If anything, he'll go to AEW and he'll put on banger after banger after banger after banger after banger. He'll be just fine. The question now remains, what does that mean for the rest of the guys like Ilja over on WWE side? And over here, will Tony Khan do Ilja Dragunov justice? Will he use him to the best of his ability on TV to help booster potential ratings? These questions remain unanswered. But what I will say is, as much as I hate somebody losing a job or walking away, in this scenario, for Ilja, I feel for him in a sense of, I wish that they would have used me better, but now let me just go out there and work my tail off and prove them wrong. And prove to them that I was that guy and that they made a grave mistake. So that's the Ilja Dragunov story. Like I said, I'm very much indifferent on how I feel about it because I do see WWE's point of view on it. However, I very much agree with Ilja. If you feel like you are not being used to the best of your abilities, get out of that situation. Go elsewhere and prove them wrong. And hopefully, Tony Khan can do that man justice. So that's Ilja Dragunov's story. And with that being said, let's go ahead and let's just hop right into AEW, because clearly that's where that man is going to end up. Let's just go ahead and let's talk about what happened on Dynamite, and then we'll bleed that right into our all-in predictions. First match, we had Will Ospreay and the United Empire versus Brian Cage, Lance Archer, and Rocky Romero. The match was fine. United Empire ended up winning, obviously giving Will Ospreay more momentum going into All In. I will say, as far as the in-ring worker standpoint, I hated that fucking finish of, trading shots back and forth, booyahs. Rocky Romero gets up, and before he literally does something big to knock down Will Ospreay and make him bump, he immediately slides and then starts taunting. Like, brother, the man is on his feet. You couldn't give him something big and then started taunting so that Will could then eventually hit you with Hidden Blade. That whole finish, just psychology-wise, it was not good. It didn't make sense. But United Empire ended up winning, just giving Will Ospreay some more momentum going into All In. We had a backstage segment with Kazuchika Okada, and he says nothing is more important than the family, and Takeshita left because he was selfish, and Kyle Fletcher is smart enough to not go down that route, and he hopes that Fletcher is happy for him when he wins, and when he wins the International Championship, and when that happens, he wants Fletcher to raise his hand at the end of it. Fletcher then comes out, and he heads to the ring with Tony Schiavone in there, and he says that he is the greatest international champion, and his reign will not end at Wembley Stadium. Fletcher agrees that family is everything, and he does owe a lot to Don Callis. Okada needs to know his role in this, and his role is to help him retain the title. They both hate Takeshita, and then Takeshita comes out, and both men start throwing hands, and there's a Blue Thunder Bomb, and then a Raging Fire by Takeshita, and he ended up standing up tall at the end, holding up the title, and then he drops it right next to Fletcher, essentially just making Takeshita look strong without doing too much harm to either Okada or Fletcher. The next segment was easily the best part of Dynamite, and that was the sit down between Will Ospreay and Kenny Omega. They went on and on and on at each other. They're backstage with Renee Paquette, and Will says that he met Kenny when he was very skinny, and this was years ago, and his main thing was just trying to make an impression on Kenny Omega. Kenny said he always wanted to keep his finger on the pulse, and said that although he was never blown away with Will Ospreay back then, he did see the potential in Will. At Forbidden Door, they fast forward. Kenny says that Will was a completely different athlete then, and he pretty much filled his shoes when he left New Japan. Kenny then says Will Ospreay's name alone is not enough to sell out an event. Meanwhile, Kenny Omega's name sells out events left and right. Will says that his vision of it and Kenny's are completely different, and that during COVID, he was restricted and had to constantly do 17-hour flights to Japan and back. Kenny had it easy, and he wouldn't be able to handle it. So this is, they went all the way back through the timeline talking about COVID during the New Japan era as well as the AEW COVID era. And pretty much Will was saying, yeah, Kenny, you had it easy. All you had to do was drive 3 hours, and then you got to at least wrestle in front of a bunch of marks for you that you had signed on your roster. Meanwhile, I was, doing 17-hour flights and then wrestling in front of nobody. Kenny then says, so what? Even if they did have fans, would they be that loud for you? So essentially, Kenny just being the true heel and just being a dick to him. Then they started talking about the Don Callis family. Kenny said that when he saw Gold as the belt collector, he was, although enamored by it, he eventually saw it for what it was, and that was Don Callis just trying to manipulate him. Will said that Kenny embarrassed him at Forbidden Door, and he showed no remorse, but Kenny said that he did the exact same thing at Forbidden Door in his hometown, where Will Ospreay took the Canadian flag. He, rubbed his nose in it. He did the towel wipe. It was just him just being a true dick. And, all these years later, they still hold that against each other. Will said that win at Forbidden Door meant nothing because it was tainted by Don Callis. Kenny says that he forgives Will for Forbidden Door, but Kenny says this feels like any way that he is trying to, in his mind, get on Kenny's level. So essentially, he's trying to be like, Will, you are literally like pulling strings and just trying to like convince yourself that you're on my level, but you're not. Kenny then talks about his diverticulitis situation, and he says that yes, if it wasn't for anybody else that brought it up, like he's sick of people bringing it up at this point. And he says his life changed with diverticulitis. It made him a better person and a better wrestler because he became smarter. He started thinking less with his body and more with his head. He asked Will if he did the same thing after his neck fusion surgery. And he's like, 3 discs, right? And you're still out here doing the same shit you were doing, expecting things to be different. Will mentions that line of when Will mentions the line to Kenny Omega about, ever since I told you that you gave up on yourself, you were gone for 4 weeks. And then that really must have just cut his ego. Kenny had never seen Will as an equal, and Kenny says that he wanted him here at his best because he didn't view MJF at that level. And then that's where Will immediately snapped at him and he said, this is all about Kenny because he feels that he needs to beat Kenny. For 10 years, he was always trying to beat Kenny Omega. 10 years straight. So that's why Kenny is in this role instead of MJF. I'm at least glad that Kenny mentioned MJF in this situation to at least kind of like tie that piece together. But at the same time, I still stand firm that, it should be MJF in this situation. And then to end it, Kenny said that he tried to do it on his own already and it failed. And this time his mother will be there watching and pretty much his entire family and friends will be there watching. And he's like, they'll still love you at the end of it. But Kenny tells Will to calm down, and he means this out of the kindness of his heart, but his 7-year-old boy will be looking for a new hero after the match. And at that point, security had to at least get in between them before hands were thrown. Like they were like this close to each other and just pulled them away. It was absolutely fan-fucking-tastic what they did in that sit-down segment. That is all it had to be. They covered years of story, which is great because, like I said previously on this podcast, they need story for the main event. This has so much history written all over it. Although I would love to see MJF versus Will Ospreay as the main event, I understand why it's not. Because of the history between Kenny and Will. That story and that, almost 10-year chase means much more compared to trying to build a 2-month program between MJF and Will. There's not enough time and not enough to tell with those two. Versus Kenny and Will, where you got 10 years worth of story that you can go back into. And obviously Kenny not being a full-blown heel, obviously just because, he is being a dick, he is being the quote-unquote cleaner, but we know how the sickos are. They love to cheer for heels. They love to cheer for baby faces. They love to cheer for the things that they love. And that's why I don't think he's a true heel, although he is going to be the heel in this match. The next really big talking point from Dynamite was the quarterfinal of the Continental Cup. And this is where we saw Jay White versus Jon Moxley. When this match was first announced, and I believe it was on Monday night, like late Monday night, it got announced, I was pissed. Absolutely pissed. Because, and I'm going to explain very thoroughly, when you look at the quarterfinal competitors, and we talked about this last week, you guys can literally go back and rewatch last week's episode. We talked about the final 8. And you're telling me, in the quarterfinal, of all places, you're going to do Jay White versus Jon Moxley, when everybody and their fucking grandmother knew that this should have been the final at All In, at Wembley Stadium. Because now, I mean, we're going to talk about it here in a second, but it's like you look at the landscape now and the Final Four, and you're like, what the fuck? Literally, what the fuck? Jay White and Jon Moxley should have been the final. And it's a fucking shame that it wasn't, because it's like you look at the match that we got on Dynamite, and it's just like, how the fuck? Why? Why are we doing this? Like, what fucking sense does it make to have Jay White versus Jon Moxley on a free episode of television that really doesn't mean a whole lot when you could have had it at your biggest fucking show of the year? Makes no sense. None. The match was so good. And it actually told a true story throughout it. It started very slow. And, Moxley started, tending to his shoulder. Obviously, Jay White and his neck issues played a huge factor into it as well. This match should have been at All In. And now it's like you look at what we got and what we're about to get, and you can't help but, like, it just sucked the sails and the wind right out of the tournament. Right out of the tournament. Nobody fucking cares at this point about whatever the rest of it is. Because now all we have left is Jon Moxley versus Claudio, 2 Death Riders going at it. And then we have Nigel McGuinness versus Kyle O'Reilly. That's it. You're telling me that we're going to have Nigel McGuinness versus Jon Moxley for the Continental Cup, for the Continental title, at All In? There's no other way they can go about it. I don't think it would make sense to have Claudio beat Moxley. I don't think it would make sense to have O'Reilly beat McGuinness as far as story goes. So we're going to get McGuinness versus Moxley for what? For what? It's just like you look at what we could have gotten with Jay White and Moxley, and you're telling me you're going to do McGuinness versus Moxley instead? I just, my head, I can't fathom how Tony Khan can be that stupid to choose that match over Jay White. I can't. I legitimately cannot fathom it. The other big talking point was immediately after the match. So after Moxley beat Jay White, it looked like they were about to shake hands, but Moxley started walking off, and then out come the dogs, and they attack Jay White. But then Brodito and Hangman ended up making the save. As that's going on, Ricochet and The Demand come out to the stage, essentially just trying to build something for the trios titles going into All In. From the sounds of it, it's going to be some sort of open challenge, which we'll talk about here in just a little bit. But it's just like, man, after we got that match, and then now immediately trying to build to the trios division, you're just like, I just, for whatever reason, I'm just like, this isn't good. It's not good. And speaking of not good, the immediate next segment between Jonathan Cruz, Andrade, and MJF did nothing. Nothing. And then obviously we had Hechicero versus Nigel McGuinness, which Nigel ended up winning. Literally nobody fucking cared about this match. Nobody was excited that Nigel won. Literally just did nothing for the tournament. And then Kevin Knight comes out and says he's the best TNT champion of all time. Darby then interrupts him and gets blasted by Pyro, which is very much, they recreated the CM Punk Jeff Hardy scenario from like 2009, I think it was. And I remember that vividly because I remember watching it on the TV when I was a kid. So they recreated that with Darby and Kevin Knight. And right after that, it pretty much just bled right into the main event, which was the Elite versus Mark Davis, El Clone, and Jake Doyle. Elite ended up winning, so Kenny keeps his momentum going. And then after the match, Will Ospreay comes out and attacks Kenny Omega. But then Kenny gets the one-up and then hits one winged angel off the apron through a table that was set up to end the show. This Dynamite, although it had a fantastic sit-down interview between Ospreay and Omega, everything else on the show really didn't do anything. As a matter of fact, I feel like it actually hurt everything else. So just because you have one good segment on a show doesn't make the show good. And that's a very reoccurring theme that we've been noticing throughout 2026. But either way, looking at it now, for the Continental Cup, we talked about it. Moxley versus Claudio, and then Nigel McGuinness versus Kyle O'Reilly. This tournament was fumbled. It was fumbled. And with that being said, let's go ahead and let's talk AEW All In predictions. First match, obviously, we just talked about it a little bit ago. Continental Cup. My prediction, it's going to be Jon Moxley versus Nigel McGuinness, and Moxley is going to end up winning. It should have been Jay White versus Moxley, and Jay White ends up winning. That's what it should have been. Obviously, we're not going to get that, and that's a really big fucking stinker. Casino Gauntlet. Obviously, the main competitors being Andrade and MJF with the number 1 and the number 2 spot. Who do I realistically see in this match? I could see guys like Tommaso Ciampa. I could see guys like Chris Jericho. I could see Ilja Dragunov easily making his debut in this gauntlet match. But either way, realistically, I feel like MJF is going to be the one walking out with the win. He's going to be back-to-back Casino Gauntlet champion, and then he is obviously going to wait and hold on to that contract just long enough to then challenge either Omega or Will Ospreay. Kevin Knight versus Darby Allin, Falls Count Anywhere for the TNT title. You know, considering the story that was essentially trying to be built between these two, there really isn't much of a story. It's more of just Kevin Knight and his heel turn and Darby taking it personal and then trying to get back at Kevin Knight. And they're going to do a bunch of crazy shit. Obviously, we know how Darby is. I feel like Kevin Knight is going to show his ass off with Darby Allin. But realistically, I can see Kevin Knight retaining that TNT title. I wouldn't put Darby Allin out of the realm of possibility to throw the title back onto him if we do want to see Kevin Knight go up a level to that main event scene. So that definitely might end up changing my prediction a little bit. I will revisit this in a little bit. But realistically, I do think that Kevin Knight ends up retaining. For whatever reason, I feel like they want to try and build him up as much as humanly possible. And taking the title off of him this soon, I don't think is going to do much for him. But at the same time, if we're trying to booster him up to that main event scene, that would be the best route to go. Brawling Birds versus Divine Dominion for the women's tag titles. This one's going to be easy. Give me the Brawling Birds. Cope and Christian versus the Young Bucks for the tag titles. This one's going to be interesting because there's a couple different ways that you could go about this. Obviously, Cope and Christian, they're on their last legs. If we do want to split them so that they can go off and, end their careers however they want, that is a possibility. On the other hand, you look at, a team like the Young Bucks, and it's just like, this would be their 4th title reign, which is the most in AEW history. So, do you necessarily want to go that route again? And if so, what other tag team is out there that could potentially be the next in line for the Young Bucks as tag team champs? My immediate thought is the Motor City Machine Guns getting into that role. I could see, obviously, the New Day potentially being in that role. But outside of that, there's really, you have tag teams, they just don't use them well. And with that being said, I think I'm just going to stick with the tried and true, and let's keep the titles on Cope and Christian. Hangman and Brodito versus, we don't really know yet. It hasn't been announced. My guess is it's going to be some sort of open challenge where we're going to see Swerve and the New Day. We're going to see the Dogs. We're going to see the Demand. And I think that's really about it. I think it's going to be a fatal 4-way trios tag match for the trios titles. And the real question is then, who do you pull the trigger on? Because realistically, the way the trios titles have been treated, it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to just keep hot potatoing the titles. I think we need to keep them on a team that can help booster up the division. I don't think Hangman and Brodito is a true trios tag team, as well as I don't think that's the right route to keep them in. Same with Swerve and New Day, because obviously we know that is going to at least most likely happen. So what do? I think what you do is you keep those two teams out of it, and then it boils down to the Dogs or the Demand. And honestly, it doesn't really matter which team you choose. Nobody's going to care. So with that being said, let's just do a shot in the dark here. I think let's just throw a dart at the board, and let's just pick the Demand to regain the trios titles. Kyle Fletcher versus Konosuke Takeshita versus Kazuchika Okada for the international title. This match is going to be fucking awesome. Calling it right now. This match might be sleeper of the entire card. And with that being said, give me Konosuke Takeshita to beat both Okada and Kyle Fletcher to become the new international champion. And the only reason I'm picking Takeshita, one, that gives him something to do, and he is incredibly fantastic at being a pro wrestler. Putting this title on him would help solidify him as being one of those guys. And then on top of that, now that can create more conflict for Fletcher and Okada with the Don Callis family. And then we can eventually get Fletcher out of there so that he can go on this generational babyface run. That's just my bold take. Willow Nightingale versus Mercedes Moné for the women's title. I think realistically, everybody's going to be rooting for Willow during this match, myself included. But I do see Mercedes Moné getting her moment at All In. Give me Mercedes to beat Willow. And then in the main event, Kenny Omega versus Will Ospreay. The story obviously writes itself. This match is going to be fan-fucking-tastic. And this is where Will Ospreay will finally get his moment. And he will be the new AEW champion. Those are my thoughts for All In for this Sunday. Obviously, I'm going to be doing my best to actually sit down and watch it. However, at the same time, my girlfriend's moving in that weekend, so I might have my hands full. Either way, I'll keep an eye on it. And before we wrap things up, let's go ahead and let's just talk about the major talking points out of WWE this week, as well as some news and rumors. Monday Night Raw started with Stephanie Vaquer, and she came out saying that wrestling is her first language, and then calls out Liv Morgan. Judgment Day end up coming out, and they put hands and feet all over her. Becky then comes out and makes the save. There's some more internal conflict between Becky and Stephanie, and then the Judgment Day take advantage of this and end up attacking both women, and the Judgment Day walk out looking strong. Usos are backstage with Solo, and they're all happy, and they're like, yeah, let's go deliver Solo to the Tribal Chief. We'll talk about that at the end of Monday Night Raw. First match we get is Javon Evans versus JD McDonough. This match was really fucking good. After the match, this match was really fucking good. Javon ended up beating JD McDonough, and then after the match, Big Cass came out and attacked Evans. Evans on the ground grabbed a mic and he asked him, "Is that all you got?" And then Evans starts fighting back on Big Cass, hits him with this big dive, but then Dominic Mysterio slams Javon Evans into the turnbuckle post, and then Big Cass takes right back over and just demolishes Javon Evans. Rey Fenix versus El Fiscal for the first round of the Luchador tournament. Winner obviously will go on to face Roman Reigns on an episode of Raw. Rey Fenix ended up winning this one to nobody's shock whatsoever. Next match we had was Sol Ruca versus Lyra Valkyria for the number one contender for the IC title. Sol Ruca ended up winning. Nothing too crazy here. I hate what they're doing with Lyra right now. I feel like ever since she turned heel and it had so much potential, and then they just shifted her entire character, and now she's stuck in this limbo. Absolute limbo, and it makes zero fucking sense. Then Bron Breakker comes out, and he calls out Oba Femi. Paul Heyman then comes out instead. Oba Femi follows shortly after and says Brock knows the future of WWE is Oba Femi, and if you have a problem with it, you can take it up with him. Bron agrees and says that he's ready to go right now. Paul Heyman then steps in front of Bron Breakker and says, you take one step closer to him, you will be permanently taking a step away from me. And then Paul Heyman goes on this spiel about WWE. We don't just pan to the fans and the people watching at home. We have shareholders. This is a publicly traded company. We need to make this match the most must-see match that we can. So at Sunday night's main event, it will be Oba Femi versus Bron Breakker, and then we can find out who the true future of WWE is. Bron Breakker shakes his head, shakes hands with Paul Heyman, and as he thinks that they're both walking out together, he turns around to look at Oba, and he sees Oba shaking hands with Paul Heyman, and that immediately turned him off, and he's just like, what the fuck was that? So obviously we got some beef stewing between Paul Heyman and Bron Breakker because of the respect for Oba Femi. It's curious to see how this is all going to play out come Sunday night's main event. Next match we had Dragon Lee versus Dr. Wagner Jr. in the first round. Dragon Lee ended up winning to nobody's surprise whatsoever. The next match was Rey Mysterio versus Chad Gable for the IC title. This match was fucking great. And I will gladly be the guy that needs to say this. Rey Mysterio, considering that man and his age, he needs to be given every fucking flower that anybody can offer. The way that man can still move, being almost 60 years old, he is killing it. Absolutely killing it. And the fans were so on their feet for Rey Mysterio. We legitimately thought that they were going to change the title. We legitimately thought they were going to switch hands with the IC title and put it on Rey Mysterio. And if that would have happened, the fans, I guarantee, would have not have blinked an eye. That's how over Rey Mysterio was in this match. But that's not the case. Chad Gable ended up retaining the IC title. It was really, really good. And then after the match, both men paid respects to each other. Very, very good stuff. And then in the main event, Roman Reigns and Jacob Fatu come out. And then the Usos follow out with Solo Sikoa. Roman belittles Solo Sikoa and he brings up Tribal Combat. And he then plays this really well done video package of how pretty much stating after Tribal Combat, Solo was supposed to fall in line. And what did he do? He ran away and he went off to Smackdown and started the MFTs and did all this stuff when realistically he was supposed to be right behind Roman again. And so Roman, he said, for 3 years, you were off running around doing whatever the fuck you wanted when you should have been right here this entire time. Roman rips the sunglasses off of Solo and stomps on him. Jacob Fatu then attacks Solo and locks in the Tongan death grip. Roman says the twins ran the play and they executed the play. And then he puts on these black Ulafalas over them, saying that these are my captains. And if you have a problem with that, you have a problem with us. After Roman puts on these black Ulafalas on the Usos, Jacob looks pissed. Pissed because he's like, where's my Ulafala? I'm the only one that's truly been, running whatever plays that you want me to run. I'm the only one who is acknowledging you and doing what you tell me to do. And so he's slighted towards that. And as that's going on, LA Knight's music hits and takes out the Usos, but then Jacob Fatu ends up attacking LA Knight. Roman then stops him and he says, I got him. Don't lay a finger on him. Then Roman Superman punch LA Knight. Roman yells at Solo to end LA Knight. So pretty much the Usos are now holding LA Knight's arms and holding him up. Very much similar to the Kevin Owens, Sami Zayn Bloodline storyline at the Royal Rumble. Pretty much being like, you listen to me. You're going to fall in line. Choose your family. And so Solo, he has the Samoan spike ready. And he's like, I'm sorry. And as he's about to go spike LA Knight, he turns and Samoan spikes Roman Reigns to a very nice pop. And then that's where LA Knight and Jacob Fatu, and that's when LA Knight and Solo Sikoa take out the Usos. And while this is all going on, Jacob Fatu is sitting in the corner doing absolutely nothing because per Roman Reigns, he said do not touch either of them. And so he's just sitting there minding his own business. And then Roman calls for a Superman punch again. And as that he's about to go for the punch, LA Knight blocks it and hits him with the BFT. And then him and Solo walk off while Jacob Fatu just stands in the corner and watches everything happen. This segment was very, very, very good. And it at least enhances that storyline for LA Knight and Roman Reigns going into Money in the Bank, which is going to be great. And obviously, with everyone's story within the bloodline now starting to turn up a little bit, Roman's going to be pissed at Jacob. Jacob, I guarantee, is going to be the next person to not follow the orders of Roman Reigns. And then from there, we can get Jacob Fatu back on track to being that Samoan werewolf, that killer that we were getting, instead of this dumbed down version of him. And then the Usos and Roman can be the last one standing because they fit well perfectly together. Meanwhile, anybody else that's aligned with the bloodline right now pretty much just takes a back seat to Roman. So we need to get Fatu out of there, and this is the best way to do it. Either way, I thought Raw was decent. It wasn't great by any stretch. It was a very decent show. But either way, it is what it is. You still got plenty of weeks to build before Sunday night's main event, as well as Money in the Bank. So you got a little bit of time yet. Curious to see what else is going to be played out that's different than what we've been getting. And then for SmackDown, show opened up with Nick Aldis warning Cody Rhodes and Randy Orton if they had to come to blows before their upcoming match, their world title opportunities would be revoked. And Sami Zayn then confronted Aldis about his missed title opportunities, unaware that Orton was standing right behind him as this was going on. Tag team title match, we had the MFTs versus Damian Priest and R-Truth, which the MFTs ended up retaining against Truth and Priest. After the match, Damian Priest looked pissed at R-Truth, so pretty much we're teasing a heel turn for Damian Priest going forward. I think that is the right way and the right route for him. Get him away from R-Truth, get him away from the silly bullshit, and get him back on track to where he needs to be. CM Punk and Randy Orton were backstage. Kathy Kelly interviewed CM Punk about defending his title in a hostile Canadian territory. Orton crossed paths with CM Punk after that. Then we had Julia versus Blake Monroe, which ended in a no contest, which how in the fuck do you debut somebody after being called up to the main roster and their first match ends in a no contest? How does that make any fucking sense? And how does that make either woman look good? That is terrible. Absolutely terrible. Then we had Trick Williams, Little Yachty, and a Baron Corbin segment, which Trick Williams and Little Yachty called out the U.S. champion, Baron Corbin. Corbin agreed to defend his title against Trick on the condition that he gets to be in the ring with Little Yachty for 5 minutes prior to. Tiffany Stratton versus Lash Legend. Lash Legend ended up pinning Tiffany Stratton after delivering the Lash extension. After the match, the Jax and Lash ended up attacking Stratton after the bell, and then Chelsea Green ran down to make the save. Obviously, continuing the stuff from last week, she still can't at least put hands and feet on either of them, so there's, she's kind of just running down there to make some sort of save. But at the same time, this was kind of a very much pump the brakes moment, which I firmly disagree on. I feel like we need to be ramping shit up instead of pumping the brakes. But either way, it is what it is. Shinsuke Nakamura teased his new tag team partner, Kiyaki, which I don't think this is going to end well for either of them. I know this is like the 8th or 9th time of trying to re-debut Shinsuke Nakamura, but at the same time, I don't think anybody cares at this point. There's nothing else for them to care about at this point. It sucks to see, but it is what it is. And then easily the best part of the show, CM Punk versus Kevin Owens in the main event for the WWE Championship. This match was actually really, really good. During the closing parts of the match, during the finish, Sami Zayn ended up coming out and he got involved and ended up hitting Kevin Owens with the WWE title, and then CM Punk capitalized to retain said title. So what does this mean? Obviously, it's not time to put the title on Kevin Owens. I do feel like sooner than later, we're going to have that conversation to get him in that main event picture, but I get why they chose not to go that route. Sami Zayn being involved in this still is good for him because, being kind of higher up in that main event scene, but not too high up, he's got to be involved in some way, shape, or form, so I understand that. Running it back with Kevin Owens, I feel like might be a little bit of overkill. So I'm curious to see what that all is going to entail. But either way, I'm not going to complain too much because if we get another KO Sammy match, I mean, they kill it every single time. I just, for whatever reason, I feel like we've already told that story so many times already. And like I said, it's going to be overkill. So what can they do different that they haven't done already? That's going to be the next big question going into next week's episode of SmackDown. SmackDown was not very good. Outside of that main event between Punk and Kevin Owens, this was a very, very forgettable SmackDown. We got a couple news and rumor reports to talk about. Bayley being first and foremost. Her current contract is set to expire towards the end of the year, and she has not signed an extension as of now. Reports indicate that AEW has discussed her potential free agency internally and holds significant interest should she test the market. You know, we love Bayley. She's obviously great at what she does. I do feel like she's been held back in WWE for a very, very long time. And although she has had main event pushes and she has been in that slot before, she's pretty much done everything you can do in WWE at this point. And I would not blame her whatsoever if she did want to go to AEW to wrestle a bunch of different women, to test herself, to see how good she truly is, to go against different women, to wrestle for different titles, and then also the big marquee matchup, the rematch between Bayley and Mercedes. Obviously, hinting back to NXT TakeOver Brooklyn between Bayley and Sasha Banks. I can definitely see that happening, and I won't be surprised if that ends up happening. The other news we got involves the tag team division over at WWE. WWE is making a concerted effort to revamp its tag team divisions across both brands. Obviously, you can tell they're trying a little bit, but then you look at like who they might have in those lower divisions who don't really have anything going on, and realistically, there isn't much there. You got rid of the New Day, you got rid of the Motor City Machine Guns, you got rid of a bunch of tag teams, and now you're just expecting to rebuild your tag team division. With what division is there? There's nothing. And if there is stuff, it's not enough to get fans to be genuinely invested into it. So, you know, they can say that they're working on it, but until I see a drastic difference, I'm going to take it all as bullshit. And with that being said, that's going to do it for today's episode. So I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and turn on that bell for all notifications. You guys can also follow me on all my social media platforms, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, at JariSpectre. Links down below in the description. You guys can also go ahead and follow the SpectreVerse page on Facebook as well. That is at the SpectreVerse. Anytime a podcast goes up or anytime I go live on my gaming channel, it will be on there first. And speaking of the gaming channel, make sure you guys, if you guys are into video games, make sure you guys go ahead and subscribe to JariSpectre Live. I will hopefully at some point be going live more consistently. I will be posting on that channel though my thoughts on the Modern Warfare 4 beta that came out this past weekend. So obviously, if you're into that kind of stuff, make sure you go subscribe to that channel. And until episode 33, where we talk about what happens on Raw and SmackDown, as well as AEW All In, we will see each and every single one of you guys next time. Peace out.
Summon the Spectre.